1970, and he was still active in 2020.
No, 50 years.
Something like that, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he started in his early 20s.
What did he ultimately reach?
I'm not really sure, but,
You would think by that time
he's got a lot of stories.
Oh, I would imagine he'd have a lot.
Yeah.
I can tell you a few police stories at some point, but...
What do you mean at some point?
Well, not today, but...
What?
What are you saying?
Okay. So, the day I got accepted to law school, to the Gonzaga School of Law, which is at the Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington, I got my letter of acceptance.
Yeah.
And, came in the mail. I opened it. I called several friends right away, close friends, Calvin, and one of my closest friends at that time, Manny Vogel, and John Bickham, who wound up being a legend in seismic, working seismic for many, many years. And lots of people who didn't, when we moved in different circles, knew of John. So there, and Glenn Tallis. So there was the four of us, and they said, well, we should do something. We should celebrate. So, okay. So I went and I rented a room at what was then called the Majestic Inn on McLeod Trail.
Yep.
And I had just bought, and you have to remember, so this is 1980. There was no such thing as indoor weed or weed stores or anything. Marijuana was smuggled in from all over the world. It was outdoor grown. It was incredibly powerful weed. You can't duplicate the outdoor conditions from Thailand or from Northern California or from the Kootenays. If you ever watch it, there was a 60 Minutes many years ago about these growers in Northern California. And Washington, most of them were ex-Vietnam veterans. They slept on their little plot with guns and guard dogs. That's how valuable this was. $300 for 1 ounce of weed.
Really?
If you equate that to today's dollars,
yep.
Well, what's $1 in 1980 to $1 in 2024?
I'm not sure.
Probably 8 times. Money doubles.
I'm going to say at least
years.
3. I'm going to say at least 3 times.
So you're talking about $1,000 a bag,
right?
Today,
right?
And we got some booze, and then a fifth friend came over, Anil Krishna. So there's the 5 of us in the hotel room, and of course we're smoking joints, we're drinking, and we're playing cards.
Yep.
There's about $1,000 in cash on the table.
Yep.
Okay, I'm working for the city as on the paving crew. All of a sudden, there's 2 raps on the door, and I go, who is? And before I could even get it out, the door opens. It's the hotel manager and 2 policemen, a sergeant and a constable. And I've got my letter of acceptance folded in my back pocket. The ounce of weed is sitting on the TV straight up like this, and you would have to go like this to clear the weed smoke out of the room. There's $1,000, and Anil had called an escort, and she's naked on the bed, in the bed. This is no shit. They come in, I go, what? And they said, who rented this room? And I said, I did. You used a stolen credit card. It was a Visa card that my mom had given me 3 years earlier when I was taking my Bachelor of Science. I guess she'd forgotten she'd given it to me. She had lost hers and reported it lost and had been issued a new one.
Wow.
And forgot I ever had another card of the same number. So in they come, and this constable was like 6'3", some Swedish-looking guy, and then the sergeant. And he wanted to arrest everybody. There's the weed. The escort goes and the sergeant goes and get dressed. Get out of here. Where you paid? Yeah. There's $1,000 chips on the table.
Underground gambling.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. Everything and booze, everything you can think of. And so, I rented the room. So he said, we were pretty normal looking.
Right.
So he told the constable who was he wanted to put everybody in handcuffs right there. He says, look, you take these 4 guys downstairs. You check if there's any outstanding warrants. And if there's not, you just let them go home. Okay? So he shuts the door and he says, well, this is quite a situation. And I said, listen, I had no idea it's my, and I pulled the credit card out and there's my mom's name on it. And I pulled out my driver's license, my name. Anyway, he says, okay, listen, I need to verify your story. I'm going to call your mom. So I was more worried about what my mom was going to say than anything this cop was going to do. So he's sitting on one bed. I'm sitting on another. And there was a bedroom to this room, too. And he starts dialing my number. I told him the phone number. And 403-255-7900. As he gets to like the 9, I put my finger, what are you going to tell her? What are you going to tell her? And he says, listen. So he starts dialing again. I did the same thing. He says, listen, I will handcuff you to allow me to dial your mother. You're just going to have to trust me. So he dials her. So it's about 7:30. Mm-hmm. And on a Thursday night, I worked a 4-day work week. So Monday through Thursday. So, I was able to, I could have stayed up all night for.
Yeah.
And he was real, didn't say anything about, said, is this Mrs. Saltman? Yes, Mrs. Saltman, I have your son here. He rented a room at the Majestic Inn. Yes, I'm familiar with where that is. But he used your credit card, and when the hotel took it, and then ultimately it came back, because there weren't computers or anything. It took a couple hours, that this card is stolen or lost.
Yeah.
Oh, she says, I had given him that card for emergency purposes a number of years ago. When I lost mine, I didn't even think or remember that I had given him a second one.
Yeah.
So my story confirmed. So he said, thank you, Mrs. Altman, and hung up the phone. So now I'm sitting there. I now pulled out my letter of acceptance to Gonzaga. And I said, would you read this? And he reads it and he says, folds it up. He says, well, this is really a situation, isn't it? And he was the greatest guy. So he's a sergeant. He said, I'm going to tell you what. Not worried about the escort. She wasn't with you, but your friend had paid her, so there's no issue there. She's gone. The constable's downstairs, and he radioed down, none of your friends had any warrants. They're all on their way home. Sorry to have broken up your party. And then he said, as for that marijuana, and back then you went to jail in 1980.
For possession.
Oh, absolutely. I had friends that up till, a good friend of mine, Brent Nolan, who was a geostatistician, one of the most famous geostatisticians in North America. So he was a geologist, and then he specialized in geostatistics when computers first came out. And he worked for ESO, and they used to send him to the United States, to Houston, 3 or 4 times a year to lecture, because ESO had, they were affiliated with Chevron back then, huge offices in...
I always thought ESO was Imperial Oil.
Well, it is.
Is it?
Imperial Oil, but they were affiliated with Chevron. And he was well known. So he had other oil companies would call Imperial Oil or ESO and say, would he be available to give us a... So he was all over the United States. He had got arrested with a hash pipe in Zellers at the lunch counter. He'd gone into the bathroom when he was 16. So now we're talking 53. And never had a problem going to the U.S. It's random. One time they punched him up, barred him from going into the U.S. for that conviction when he was 16.
When you said 53, do you mean 1953?
No, I mean when he was 53 years old.
Oh, they banned him from going to the United States when he was when
one
he was
of his
50
trips
years old.
through, so he had to go back to Imperial Oil. Well, I can't go.
So can he theoretically to this day, or
people in Canada are mistaken if they think a pardon, which he had from the Canadian government, is worth anything, you need a waiver from the United States.
Right.
So I ultimately dealt with the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs in Canada. It took me 3 years to get this. It's not a legal process. It's a foreign policy process. So I didn't start with the Deputy Minister, but it kept going up. And I had letters from the president of SO Canada, et cetera, sent them all. And he dealt with the secretary, the underlings to the Secretary of State in the United States. And he got a waiver issued by the U.S. government. And that's what it's called. It's a waiver. So if I'm coming from Canada with a Canadian government pardon, the U.S. doesn't give a shit. If I'm coming with a U.S. waiver, I'm Canadian and I'm going through U.S. customs to go into the U.S. and I have a waiver, there's no issue. So at 56, he was able to go back in.
I had a friend that worked for customs in the early 2000s in Canada, and he was telling me he'd got so many Americans coming up with, a shoplifting charge from 30 years ago or, a DUI from 22 years ago.
Would he deny them entry?
And he said, he felt kind of stupid doing it because a lot of these guys in their 50s and 60s and they're professionals. And he just said it's Canadian law. They I believe most criminal charges, they won't let a foreigner enter the country.
Well, it depends now. Okay, let me finish so the sergeant said, listen, how much was that? And I told him $300. It was $280 for the ounce. He says, listen, if I hear the toilet flush, I'm going to assume that's gone. And so I actually, I didn't really pay attention other than hear the toilet flush. I dumped the whole thing into the toilet and flushed it. I come walking out. He says, okay, did you put that down your sock or down your pants? Or I said, no, I flushed it down in the toilet. He said, I hope you're going to be a smarter lawyer than you are listener, because I told you if I hear the toilet flush, I'm going to assume the weed is gone. Anyway, I wound up taking him a bottle of Crown Royal on the Monday, and I ultimately wound up doing a divorce for him.
You're kidding.
No, about 12 years later, we kept in touch. He was in District 6, which was my home district, which is right behind the co-op there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a really good guy. Another quick story with the police. So I did a divorce for a Detective Bill Pafford. I'll guarantee you that Mr. Wood would know who Bill Pafford was. He was a very, very famous. So he was a detective with the city of Calgary Police.
Nice. That's very high up.
Yeah. And his hands were the biggest hands I've ever seen. I mean, he was just a strong man, but his hands were like,
how tall is he? What do you think?
6 feet, but he had the hands of a 7. Some basketball looked like a grapefruit in them.
Wow.
So, and this was after 30 years of marriage. So he was in his early 50s. And at that time, I was also representing the King's Crew, who ultimately became the Hells Angels here.
They got patched over.
Yeah. And I'd been in the King's Crew clubhouse up in Ogden several times, just not socially, and it was like a fortress to get in there. But he took me to the Cuff and Billy, which was across from the provincial courthouse on 6th Avenue.
That used to be Provincial Courthouse.
Yeah. It used to be on 6th Avenue in between 1st and 2nd Street Southeast.
That used to be Cafe Della Sport, right?
No, Cafe Della Sport was on 7th.
Oh, okay.
Frank's Cafe Della Sport.
Yeah.
But the Cuff and Billy was right across the street in this kind of empty lot.
I believe it's still there.
Well, I saw more bad stuff in that Cuff and Billy than I ever saw in the King's Crew clubhouse. Cocaine, hooker, gambling.
This is the police bar.
Yeah. So, and I was sworn to secrecy. He says, we never bring anybody in here, but I trust you. So, anyway, there was an application which, with court procedures and everything back even today, I mean, it was months and months to set a date for anything. And I had really pushed this through at his request, really pushed it through. And it was scheduled for a Thursday. And we'd met on Tuesday, and he was all prepped. It wasn't the trial, but it was a major application dealing with alimony and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And he was supposed to come to the office. The application was 10 a.m. Supposed to be at my office at 8:30. And, being 30 years in the police force, he was punctual, and he's not there. Doesn't show up. It's now 9:15. I call him.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't cell phones or anything. Right? Yep. So I'll pick up my rotary phone or punch phone and call. No answer. 9:45, I called the court. I said, my client is not available. I'm going to still appear. I have his affidavits are filed. There'll be no verbal testimony, no oral testimony.
Yep.
He's not here. I was talking to the judge's clerk. 5 minutes later, my phone rings, and it's Bill Pafford. Bill, what the hell is going on? Where are you? He says, Garl, I just landed in Ottawa. Have you read the paper this morning? I said, no, I got here. Okay, well, you'll see on the front page of both city papers, which were the Herald and the Albertan, a lady in Ottawa, 30 years old, was standing up, coming out of, she worked for the government. Ottawa has the highest rate of women to men in the city, in the country of Canada, because of the government. There's so many. She's standing on the steps, and she was murdered with a crossbow. Her estranged husband was positioned about 30 yards away behind a bush and crossbowed her right through the heart, one shot. And he was in Ottawa. Front page of the paper, both papers. So I was able to take that into court, and I got an adjournment with the hearing.
But how does that relate to him?
It was his daughter.
Oh, I didn't know it was his daughter. Did you say that?
His daughter was murdered.
Oh, my God.
Thursday.
That's brutal.
Sorry, Wednesday.
Yeah.
And he finds out Wednesday night. He's on the first plane out of here Thursday morning. Crossbowed.
Going through a divorce and your daughter dies like that.
Her estranged husband. He flew from Calgary and premeditated, It's the only crossbow murder I've
never even heard of a crossbow murder.
I thought we're dealing in the 16th century with, Knights of the Round Table or some damn thing.
You don't need a license to get a crossbow.
Probably not.
But back then, I don't know if you needed a license to purchase a gun in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
You did?
Oh, yeah.
Because I know I used to buy bullets without a license.
Yeah,
now you need a license for bullets.
You needed a license, and you could only get a license if you were a member of a gun club or had a hunting license. You could buy a rifle. You could not buy a handgun in Canada unless you were a member of a gun club or a collector, and it was a non-workable gun.
Really?
Yep.
Interesting.
Handguns. Rifles, whole different story.
I believe...
In the U.S., you can buy a handgun at the 7-Eleven.
I believe in Canada, you can no longer buy a handgun, period, under any circumstance. Sorry, except for if you're an Olympic or a sport shooter.
Yeah.
And they have...
I think still a member of a gun club you can.
I don't know. But I know they have very limited magazines. Like I think it's down to like 6 bullets or something like that.
Yeah, and I would think that the assault rifle's same situation.
Well, it's interesting. They use the term assault rifle, but they're like, how do you define assault rifle?
Well,
like if it's black, they call it an assault rifle.
It's an automatic weapon. In other words, you just have to hold the trigger in.
I don't think you can buy an automatic weapon in Canada for a long time. Yeah, and you can modify a semi-automatic, certain kinds to be automatic.
Certain kinds.
But they've banned a lot of
But
those
again,
now.
in Canada, they won't sell ones. So let's say Colt makes a modifiable. Right. In Canada, they will not allow Colt to put that model into.
Yeah. I think that's why they've banned a lot of
and same in most
rifles recently.
Scandinavian countries and whatnot in Europe.
Yeah.
Obviously, Great Britain, Great Britain or England probably has the longest standing restricted gun laws. I mean, for many years, bobbies couldn't carry guns.
Right.
And I know that's changed somewhat, but you don't really hear about too many mass killings in Canada or Scandinavian countries or England. In the United States, is generally one a month.
Yeah, probably something like that.
Some don't even make front page anymore. All 13 people were killed at a McDonald's.
Yeah,
it's pretty sad.
They have a limit. I think it's something like if it's over 4 or more people, I believe it's classified as a mass shooting, and they have a lot of them.
Oh yeah,
but Britain, they have mass stabbings.
Yeah, in Scotland too. It's amazing in Scotland, the knife work, but yeah.
Or they have guys going around with machetes.
Yeah. Because guns are pretty much inaccessible.
That's interesting.
It's a good thing.
Did you ever see, I know the courthouses now have the metal detectors, but how long have the metal detectors been in place for?
Well, I would say when they built this new courthouse here, that's when they went in. They never had them in.
Oh, really?
Never.
Did you ever see somebody pull out a gun in a court?
No.
Interesting.
Although in the United States, plenty of stories of that.
Did you ever see instances where they had to protect somebody that, did a heinous crime and they're at risk of being killed?
Twice here, where they would bring a stand-in in one car, and identical cars go different routes to the court. And whatnot. And there was an underground entrance. There is at both.
Yeah.
The cells in both courthouses are in basement floors.
Okay.
Like if you're convicted and you're handcuffed in the courtroom and you're taken out, there's holding cells downstairs until the end of the court day, and then you're shackled ankles and your handcuffs, and you trot yourself to the bus, which has no windows, and well, you go.
That's if you're in custody. Is there situations where, maybe more for
I think once I don't know of a situation where once you're convicted that you're not serving, you're not taken.
Does anybody ever go from their house directly to court for a criminal trial?
Oh yeah,
for something minor.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Not necessarily minor. If you've made bail.
Okay.
That situation.
So you could theoretically show up in your street clothes.
I'd say more often than not.
Okay, and then you get sentenced and you go directly, or do you ever have to?
You don't
go
get
home and then go
home and pack a bag.
No, that's brutal.
No, so some loved one or a friend. I mean, they're not bringing you up clothing because you're wearing a jail suit. Yeah. They'll bring you up. You can't bring your own toothbrush and toothpaste or anything like that. It's all supplied.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So the toothbrushes are bendable, so you can't make a shiv out of them and all that.
I always thought it was toothbrushes. People make car soap?
It's not like a hotel. Oh, well, we'll give you a couple hours to go home and pack a bag. I mean, you were just sentenced to 12 years,
Straight to jail.
I'm not coming back here. Right. If they gave me 2 hours to pack a bag, it'd be hightailing it as fast as I could out of wherever I am.
Isn't there a situation where the time between when you're charged and your actual conviction, don't you get double time served for that? So if it took 2 years,
generally, yes.
So if theoretically took 2 years for you to get convicted,
and you're in remand, they'll credit you with 4 years,
even if you haven't actually served anything yet. You're just awaiting trial,
awaiting your sentence,
even though you might be at home.
Until you haven't even been convicted,
right?
Okay, you were charged,
right?
You failed to make bail,
okay,
and you can bring a bail application it's time determinate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I was denied bail by this judge. I can make my next bail application in 90 days.
Okay,
denied. And my trial ultimately shows up 2 years later, 2.5 years later.
So that's where the credit would come in.
Yes, absolutely.
What I was referring to is, let's say you make bail and then you got a year before you're actually tried and convicted.
Right.
Is there any credit for that time?
No.
Oh,
no.
That's interesting.
Because you made bail.
Right. Okay.
You're not incarcerated.
I see. Okay.
So.
All right.
So those are the two. Now, when I was representing the King's Crew, I lived in District 6, the same district that sergeant was then in. And they used to stop me every 6 weeks, middle of the day, whenever. Hi, Garl, how's it going? Oh, it's going fine. Listen, guys, they're not my friends. I don't have them over for dinner. We don't go to movies together. They're just clients. Oh, we just wanted to see how you're doing, right? Without fail, that went on for 5 years, every 6-8 weeks.
They just like to harass you because you're assisting guys that they find threatening.
Because I'm the lawyer for a notorious biker gang.
Would they theoretically do that if you were representing a notorious individual?
Highly doubtful.
They just hate bikers.
Well, it was a gang, and it was in District 6, right? Ogden. Mm-hmm. And it kept them quite busy.
You were living in District 6?
Chinook.
Whereabouts?
Chinook. Off Elbow.
Okay.
Chinook Park.
All right.
So, Haysboro, Chinook, Kelvin Grove, Mayfair, Bel Air.
So, which was the bike gang that was based in the Bowness area?
The Grim
Reapers. And then
Satan's Choice was out of Forest Lawn.
Was there
that was it.
There was the 3. There was a Rebels motorcycle club, though, too.
Not here.
There was.
Was there?
I don't know where they were based.
Maybe they were out of Forest Lawn.
Inglewood, maybe. Okay.
I know when I represented the King's Crew, which was for 5 years, there was the only other relevant gang was the Grim Reapers, and they were massive in Red Deer, and they were massive here.
When you say you represented them for 5 years, what caused you to stop representing them?
They patched over.
Okay.
I didn't want to, the Hells Angels had a whole different connotation than the King's Crew.
I'm not going to say anything.
You're talking now an international bike gang.
Right. When they patched over... If they
stopped me every 6 weeks, it would have stopped me every week.
When they patched over in Calgary, my dad had a friend that, got patched over, and he said, I don't want to be part of this. And they said, well, you got to leave your bike. So he leaves his bike. They go, well, that's not enough. And he had an old, muscle car. I'm not
just to get out.
Yeah. And they go, well, we want the car too. So he gave him the car. Yeah. And they go to my dad. They got my dad to sell it. And he goes, it was a shame because of a $30,000 car that he sold at auction for like $6,000.
I am telling you this, so on another day, I'll tell you a story about colors because they value that more than they value their wives, their jacket with the colors. But when the Hells Angels determined that they wanted to come to Calgary, one of the reasons they wanted to come to Calgary, it was a very wealthy city.
Yeah.
Very wealthy. Still is, but not nearly what it was when oil was flowing out of Alberta.
Right. Which
unfortunately is not to the same extent because of our Liberal government. But they had a condition everywhere they went. There only can be one bike gang.
Right.
So the remnants of Satan's Choice and the Grim Reapers, which was a larger bike gang than the King's Crew in terms of numbers.
Yeah.
Not now. This didn't apply to the Red Deer chapter of the Grim Reapers.
Okay.
Is they had to patch over, and the King's Crew, when I was representing them, they were in a war with the Grim Reapers. There were 5 murders during the time that I was representing 3 King's Crew and 2 Grim Reapers.
Yeah.
I represented a King's Crew member who had planted a bomb under one of the Grim Reapers' cars that didn't go off.
Okay.
And he got caught, and he was charged with attempted murder. But so there was many attempts too, but they had to. It was a whole. When I tell you the colors meant everything, it was a whole ceremonial situation that took a lot of negotiating. No different than a company trying to buy another company, a merger. I mean, it was. So the Grim Reapers ultimately patched over to the King's Crew. So the King's Crew went from 35 members to 90.
Oof.
Not all of them patched to the Hells Angels. Because the Hells Angels, I think when the patching over occurred, it was like 40. And I'm not sure. they stay very low key here. They're out of the news. You don't read much about them in the papers, but
Yeah.
they're there.
Yeah.
And they're into a lot of stuff. So
We had a guy that worked for us that was in it. He was one of the hardest working guys. I mean, he wasn't an employee of ours, but he was a subcontractor.
they all have, solid day jobs, most of them.
Yeah. I remember he'd invited me to go curling with them one time, go golfing.
Wow.
And, I didn't make it, but I said, hey, how was your golf tournament on the weekend? And he said, well, it's okay, but the cops are following us the whole time on the course, and it's just it's just stupid.
I went to the president of the King's Cruise wedding, which was held in Fish Creek Park.
Yeah.
And Judge Dinkle, who was a Court of Queen's Bench judge, Court of King's Bench now, was a justice of the peace as well, obviously. He performed the ceremony in Fish Creek Park. And there were police all around. And then the reception was in Ogden at the community hall or something at 10 o'clock. And what I was most interested in was the parents of these guys. Looking at them, the ones that were there.
Well, the kids probably didn't fall far from
in some respects, they didn't fall far from the tree at all. But by 10 o'clock, everybody was fighting. The groom was, rolling down the stairs. I got the hell out of there. It was turned into quite a shit show. But,
yeah, I had a friend's cousin who got married, and they had some biker affiliations. Yeah, there was fights in the parking lot.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Yeah, I just stepped over bodies rolling down as they went out. But that was then.
Right. All right.
Okay, so I'm going to give you my quick take on Wimbledon. So,
okay, good. There's been a few upsets, eh? I heard Djokovic lost.
Not so much in the men's. The women's, so the defending champion in both men's and women's, they get the first match on center court, first match of the tournament.
Okay.
She lost to an unseeded player, the woman.
Wow.
And Carlos Alcaraz, who was the Wimbledon champ from last year, he won. The men's seeds are all pretty much still there. So the only really relevant players right now, Djokovic, who is not going to win. He's not going to win.
I could have swore I heard he lost today.
No, he won today.
Did he?
Yeah, 4 sets.
Oh, so he lost a set.
He lost the third set.
Okay.
To a 22-year-old British player who just came out of college.
Wow.
So right now, the top 4 collegiate players in the United States, the top 4 were all British.
Okay.
So TCU, Texas Christian, had 2 of them.
Wow.
And TCU was in the college football playoffs 2 years ago. So they're a top athletic school.
Yeah.
And one's at the University of Tennessee. So, 3 of the top 5 collegiate players last year in the United States were British. Mm-hmm. And so this gentleman, 22, had just graduated.
Yeah.
And was playing Djokovic second round on center court and won the third set. But Djokovic won the fourth. It was close the whole way through. But you have to understand, so Djokovic tore his meniscus at the French Open. Had to withdraw. He only had surgery 21 days ago. Arthroscopic. And,
still not
football players are back in there. But he's moving pretty good. But it's either going to be Jannik Sinner, who's ranked number 1 in the world. He won the Australian Open this year. That's the first major.
Okay.
Alcaraz won the second, which is the French. So the Grand Slam of golf is the Masters, the PGA, the U.S. Open, and the Open, or the British Open.
Right.
The Grand Slam of tennis is the Australian Open, the French Open, Wimbledon, and the United States Open.
Okay.
Australian Open is on hard court.
Yeah.
French Open is on clay. Wimbledon is on grass. And the U.S. Open is on hard court. Okay?
Okay.
So those are the 3 surfaces in tennis. Alcaraz is the defending Wimbledon champ. Alcaraz is 21. He's won 3 of the 4 majors. He's won the U.S. Open, he's won the French Open this year, and he's won Wimbledon last year. So 2 years ago, he won the U.S. Open. Last year, he won Wimbledon, and this year he won the French Open, and he's 21.
Wow.
Jannik Sinner, who's Italian, and Alcaraz is Spanish.
Okay.
Yannick Sinner, who's Italian, won the Australian Open this year. So the two majors that have been played, Sinner won the Australian on hard court. Alcaraz won the French on clay. He played Sinner, not in the final. The final was Zverev and Alcaraz. He beat Sinner on clay. Right now, I think they played 8 times or something. It's about 4-4, Sinner and Alcaraz. So these are the next. So there was the big 3 for many years: Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. Excuse me. The only player still playing is Djokovic. There's a new big 2 coming: Sinner and Alcaraz. And right now they're about even. It would be very hard for me to pick between them right now. I think Sinner might have more weapons, but Alcaraz is the fastest I've ever seen on a tennis court. Movement.
You mean like side to side, like running movement?
Side to side, front to back. He's an amazing.
So who do you think would win between the two of them if they're in the final?
I would flip a coin right now. I haven't seen enough of them play yet. In a Grand Slam, so what differentiates a tennis Grand Slam from other tennis tournaments, it's 5 sets.
Right, yeah.
Best of 5 for the men. And you have to win 7 matches. Okay? On Masters 1000, which is the next level, is 6 matches, best of 3. All tournaments are best of 3 except the majors.
Right.
And so far at Wimbledon, there's been 29 5-set matches, and we're not even into the 3rd round. The most ever before was 25 for the whole tournament.
You're kidding.
Nope. This is and there's been 9 matches where the guy was down 2 sets to love and came back and won. So he won the next 3 sets.
Wow.
And one of them was the Canadian, Felix Auger-Aliassime, was up 2 sets to none. And unfortunately, it was raining, so they postponed his match till the next day, or he would have closed that out. But he lost. Coming back the next day, Kokkinakis won 3 straight sets.
Is Wimbledon? It's not like soccer where there's pools. It's like if you lose, you're out. Is that
you're
correct?
out.
Okay,
It's
so
the most famous
one loss and you're out.
In the world.
Yeah,
I would say that all Europeans dream of. Everyone in the world outside the United States dreams of winning Wimbledon.
Who plays tennis?
Yeah, and most United States players, if they said, what's your preference? The U.S. Open, which is considered the toughest tournament to win, or Wimbledon. Growing up as a tennis player, and a pretty serious one as a junior, Wimbledon, for me.
Why is the U.S. harder to win than Wimbledon?
Just the crowds and the times you play. They have a night session where it's considered.
It's physically challenging, more taxing.
On a hard court, you don't get the length of rallies, or on a grass court, you don't get the length of rallies that you can on a hard court. On a hard court, you could have 25. The French Open is the most physically taxing.
Okay.
Because it's on clay.
Right.
Clay, it's not unusual to see every rally go 20, 25 shots.
Why is that?
Because clay's slower.
Oh, so you have a better chance of returning the ball.
Sure. Okay. Absolutely you do.
And grass is faster?
The fastest. The ball doesn't bounce as much as skids.
Oh,
grass is amazing.
Different. That's interesting.
Amazingly fast.
Interesting.
Yeah. You'll see a 10-shot rally at Wimbledon is considered.
Interesting. Okay. So you're not predicting a winner yet. You're predicting.
I'm predicting that Sinner, they're not in. Wait a second.
Let me write this down.
They're not in the same half of the draw because Sinner is seeded number 1, Djokovic is seeded number 2, and Alcaraz is seeded number 3. So what happens, if all the seeds get through, the top seeds, 1 plays 4 and 2 plays 3, which is the advantage of being the number 1 seed. Same in the college football, right?
Right.
1 plays 4, 2 plays 3.
It's Alcaraz?
Carlos Alcaraz, Alcarez.
Yeah.
And Yannick Sinner, Sinner. YA.
And would you predict that one of those two will be making the finals?
One of those two will win.
Okay.
That's my prediction.
Okay. So I'll put 1,000 on each. And
yeah, that's my prediction.
Okay. Okay. I'll use that. Done. Cut.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.